G'day and welcome back to another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups. On this episode, I'm going to show you how to install a sump and an oil pickup on an A-Series inline engine. Alright, so first thing you need to do is make sure that both the sump surface, so this one here, and the block surface is very clean. Mine have been pressure washed, they've been hot bathed, they've been acid washed, they've been absolutely everywhere. They've done everything so they're all nice and clean. So I'm just going to run a little bit of sealant around the outside here where it's going to be sealing. So we have two different gaskets. There's one that sits on this side and one that sits on this one, as well as a half moon that sits up here, as well as on this side. So like I said before, these don't run a rear main whatsoever. They only run the seal inside the end cap for the crankshaft, but they run a cork gasket on either end of the crankshaft. Now, before we go any further, we need to make sure that we install the oil pickup. The oil pickup sits directly here and it screws into this fitting just here. So it is imperative to make sure we fit that, because if you don't, you're going to get no oil pressure, then you're going to create catastrophic damage. Alright, so like we've discussed in previous episodes and just before, this is where the rear main would be, but in our case it has a corkscrew fitting inside there which causes the oil to get pushed back, and by the look of this is probably the drain pipe from that. So if someone can please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, that would be terrific. Now, this has a forget what sort of fitting this is. I think it's like a mushroom or something style fitting. It has like a nut at the end. So as it tightens up, it does have a flared fitting, a flare fitting, I think that's what it's called, just here. And it also has one on the inside of the block. So as it gets tightened up, it then seals it. So it's like a brake pipe. So what we need to do is we're just going to wind that in by hand until it comes to a stop. We're then going to grab our two 1/4 inch bolts and stick them in either side here. Alright, so like always, starting them by hand, I'm just going to nip these up. Now it is worthwhile noting as well that you do have a longer and a shorter bolt. The shorter bolt goes on the outside, whereas the longer bolt goes on the inside. Alright, so once again, this doesn't have a torque setting. I'm just going to nip these up. They don't need to be super duper mega tight. It is only a 1/4 inch bolt, so just nip it up and that should be fine. What we do need to make sure of is that we tighten this one nice and firm. Alright, so grab yourself a 15/16 spanner and we're just going to tighten that up. Once it's firm, give it a little nip. Alright, there we go. Now, before we start it, we're also going to put an oil pressure gauge on the engine just to make sure that this sucker is sucking properly and there's oil pressure to the top of the engine. Otherwise, if we don't, we're going to cause catastrophic damage. Alright, so once everything is tight, we can then start the reassembly process of the sump gasket all the way along here. Now, it is imperative to make sure that whenever you start a freshly built engine, do not connect anything that will make the engine start. If you need to leave the plugs out, do so. If you're going to leave the coil off, do so. The reason for that is you want to make sure that you get oil pressure before the engine starts. If you don't, you're going to cause irreversible damage. Alright, so grab your sealing agent, and in our case, once again, it's just the aviation former gasket. We're just going to run it around the outside of the sump. Doesn't matter if you do a little bit more than what's actually required, you can always wipe it off in the end. You'd prefer to have a little bit more than a little bit less in terms of this stuff. Now, when it comes to Celastic, you do need to be very, very careful. I have seen many engines before that have had Celastic placed on them and way too much placed on them. Now what happens there is that the Celastic gets inside all of the oil galleries. It blocks them up. It then causes oil control problems, which then also causes irreversible, and you guessed it, massive, massive catastrophic damage. Alright, so it's also worthwhile noting there are two different gaskets. Now I can only imagine this one's going to go here because of the shape of it, and then this one will go on this side. Alright, so as you can see, this sump here, it is worthwhile noting that at the front where my fingers are, just at the front and at the back, there is a cork gasket. I'm going to run some sealant around here as well as on the mating surface of the sump. That way we can ensure that it's going to seal properly. Now, I just wanted to fit it, and I realized that these 2 screws in the bottom here, I just need to wind them out just a little bit, just to ensure that I can get it to mount properly. Failure to do so will cause it to touch, and therefore going to give us a bad time, and it's not going to seal properly. All right, so one thing you didn't see off camera was I just loosened these 2 bottom timing case bolts off, simply because it wasn't going to go down with the thickness of the bolts sticking out as far as it did, and therefore it was probably going to cause it to leak. So force it down there. Now, because the rubber, or the cork gasket, should I say, on either side, it's going to sit a little bit proud, but over time, as we push it down, it's going to torque it up. It's then going to squash it, compress it, and seal it properly. All right, so like I showed on the video on the removal, we have a bolt, we have a washer, and we have this ovaled washer. They just sit directly there, and that just allows it to apply extra load, or surface area, I guess, to the side of the sump. So when we tighten those up, we just got to make sure that they are parallel to this line here. Go and install each and every one of them, then come back and tighten them one by one. So once all the bolts are in, you can then go and tighten it. A really good way to do it is just start in the middle, go to the opposite side, tighten that one, and then go to the opposite side, do this one, do the opposite one, and then just go bigger and bigger in a circle. All right, last piece of the puzzle is our new sump plug. As you can see, it is magnetic, so any debris that is inside the engine, it's going to help pick up any swarf. So wind it in there, nice and easy. Make sure as well you use a brand new sump plug washer. All right, let's grab yourself a socket, and I'm just going to nip that up. Last thing left to do, to show that we've tightened it up, I'm just going to put a mark at the bottom. That way we know we've done it. Alrighty, so that's the episode for today, guys. I hope you liked it, and I hope you enjoyed something. Like I've said in many videos before, there is plenty more to come on this build, so please stay tuned. If you haven't already, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button for more detailed videos like this. So this is probably the first full engine build I've cut into the amount of videos and episode series that I've ever really done. But I think it's really important to be able to show these sort of steps along the way, to show people that it isn't really as hard as what you believe it to be, especially if you don't have a lot of knowledge. Yes, you do need the knowledge and experience and know-how to do particular things, but not everything is as hard as what it seems. So once you're up to this stage, it's then time to flip it back over and start reassembling some of the oil gallery plugs. We need to install the oil filter housing, which we're probably going to do when it's inside the car, simply because this is where the mounts onto it. We need to do the distributor, the oil pressure relief valve, the fan at the front, and yeah, there's a couple more dregs to do. So yeah, stay tuned. Also, we're going to adjust the rockers, or the valve clearances, should I say, off camera, and then we're going to use the new L-shaped brackets, which if you haven't already seen on the Minisport episode, please check it out, rather than using the installation tool. So it's just pretty much 2 L brackets that will sit at the top. That way it'll just hold on to the rocker studs, and we can install the engine that way. That is by far probably going to be the easiest, and there's no point installing the rocker cover to slide those underneath and then cause damage. So we're going to use those to be able to lift it in. I'll probably do it with the engine and gearbox assembled. That way it just goes in a lot easier. If you're ever unsure of anything, like I said before in previous videos, you can reach out to me on Instagram. If you haven't already, check it out on my Instagram page. You can always DM me if you have any questions. You can also check out the owner's manual as well if you can find something online. Nowadays, the good thing about the 2023, when you're watching this, if not in the future, you can pretty much Google anything and you get almost any answer that you're after. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. But not only that, but it's also advised to seek professional advice. When you're doing this sort of stuff, yes, you can do it yourself. Yes, there is step-by-step videos in which I'm doing, but you just need to remember that if it is above your skill set, there's no harm in asking for help. Simple as that. I get stuck all the time, and there's many things that I don't know about cars, and I learn along the way. So mates like Paul Jeffries and Classic Mini DIY really help me with those videos, as well as the knowledge that I have working on other vehicles. So guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you right here on another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups.